Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
So, hey, Steve, we were, before we went live today, we were just talking about the fact that it'd be kind of cool for us from time to time to talk a little bit, raw and real about what we're experiencing in our clinics with clients we're working with every day, our, group therapy that I do, and just kind of what's been going on over the last 30 days or so. And one of the things I've noticed, it seems like, this is always the case, but there just seems to be an uptick in this. And maybe it's the coronavirus thing or people are so isolated, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole concept, we like to call the addict versus God. Right? I have all of these addiction behaviors. I have these things that are not in harmony with my value system. I don't like a lot of aspects of my addiction. I behave in ways that are despicable and disgusting, and I regret them after. So I have all of that going on. And yet at the same time, people tell me, well, make sure you take care of your relationship with God.
Yeah.
Are you close to him? Do you feel, do you have a really raw, authentic relationship with him? Is it awesome? And I just remember back with decades of addiction for me, I found those things to be at just polar opposite odds. Like, wait a second, I'm engaging in these crazy addiction behaviors, and then I'm also supposed to be close to God at the same time. And I had, it was tough for me to navigate through that. And I find that my clients struggle with that a lot. And so I talked about the fact, let's talk about that today, this addict versus God concept. And
I love it.
How do you navigate that? How do you make sense of that into something that's helpful for your recovery?
Yeah, I totally agree. This is, I have seen probably more of this over the last month myself, and like you indicated, probably for some similar reasons. But it is, we were talking about this before. I think that this topic in some form or fashion comes up probably almost every day, honestly, in my clinic, to some degree or another. This variance between, that higher power God figure and ourselves. And there's a lot of things that I think contribute to it, getting off course or getting off base or that disconnection, we'll call it. There's a lot that leads into it. One topic that we've talked about in passing, and we're going to cover this more tomorrow, particularly as we address this, or not tomorrow, next week.
We're doing one tomorrow.
We're going to marathon this thing. You guys love this podcast so much. We're doing an episode a day now. No, next week we'll talk more about this with spouses. But trauma is a big factor, right? And in let's call it warping or distorting, right, that relationship with God. When we go through difficult things in life, and it's not just around the addiction, right? I've shared many times on here, and Mark has as well, how we had many experiences outside of the addiction, completely separate. Parents passing, illnesses, abuse, that all contributed to some of that flawed thinking. And part of the reason why is because when we go through trauma, or when we look at and observe right behaviors from people that we care about, parents, mentors, leaders, be they spiritual or otherwise. Kids are sponges. People are sponges to a degree, but kids especially. And we formulate. I mean, there's been a lot of research to show that most people tend to form a concept of what God is like, not just from what they're taught, but almost more like, in terms of like doctrine per se, quote unquote, but more, just as much, if not more so, by actual action, right? What is modeled for them, what is demonstrated for a parent, or again, a mentor leader reacts when you make a mistake, right? Is there a shaming component to it? Is it more of a loving experience, right? That would just be one example among many. And so there's a lot that goes into this, and it is a complicated ball of wax to kind of unwind. And we're not going to fix it all today, just like any of these topics, but we did want to delve into a little bit because it is a problem for clients. And I think this is, this is an addiction topic, but this is really a good topic for just about anybody. So I think that you have to, if you're step one with this is kind of doing a little bit of reflection as we're going through this podcast today, about what might be some of the origins of where you form this idea of who God is in your life. And then the second part, which I'm interested to hear from you about, is, what I always ask clients is how's that working for you? Right? That understanding of God.
Yeah. No, and I like what you said. This is a very complicated topic, and we're not trying to suggest in this podcast that, we're religious experts or we have all the answers, or the way you're doing it or the way your organization is doing it is wrong. That's not our intention at all. It's really just to kind of help all of us come, get a better understanding of, where has my relationship with my God been,
Hmm.
and what have been the results of that, and are there ways that I can progress on that path of my relationship. You said something interesting. I know as a kid, uh, uh, pre-adolescent, in my teen years, and even my young adult years, a lot of my concept of God came from what I was hearing religiously. And
Yeah.
the important part with that you mentioned is it wasn't just the factual words that were being spoken. It was the fact that those words were being filtered through my brain. They're going through my filter. And what I've noticed today as I look back, things that I thought, for example, religious leaders were saying to me, and how I interpreted those. And
Hmm.
frankly, I was pretty angry for a long time about things, quote, that they said. And now today, as I've gone back to read those same words or listen to some of those same recordings, my interpretation today is different.
Yes.
I'm like, whoa, that's what I thought he was saying in
Mm.
those all those years when I was in my addiction. Whoa, that's not what I think that means today at all.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to understand that we can have assumptions and be pretty rock solid in what we think certain things mean about God and what he thinks of us and how he works. And you'll find as time goes by that you'll realize that those things that you thought you were absolutely accurate about have changed.
Yeah.
That's very true for me. But,
Oh, I totally agree, and I love how the spin you put on that, because I agree with you. There is no, this doesn't have anything to do with, per se, this, what religion you're a part of versus not, or anything like that. What we're really talking about today is what I call the human factor, right?
yeah.
Because we have people, and it's not just other people, it's also just our own thinking, right? Our own one of these days, I know we keep promising a podcast on thinking errors, and we're really going to do it.
Yeah.
But our own thinking errors, and which distort the way we see the world for different reasons. All those things play a role, and act as quote unquote mediums, right? Through which we oftentimes find ourselves interacting with God over the course of our entire life. And because those mediums are flawed, because those mediums are human, right? By nature, it's the logical conclusion is going to be that, even though much of what I've been quote unquote taught in these other ways we're talking about is true and correct, there are probably, again, logic would say that there are probably a lot of thinking error flaws that have come in terms of how that's been interpreted. um, Going back to that concept, because I understand I remember in my addiction years when I first was kind of introduced to this concept, this idea of considering something different about something so foundational as what God is was kind of like
Mm.
bordering on the blasphemous. Right?
Right.
Like that was just like not okay. There were just certain things you didn't talk about. But the thing of it is, that I've come to realize, and this is what kind of helped me to overcome that, is that just like with any other relationship, I have a relationship with my God, with my higher power. And just like a relationship with another person, it evolves and it changes over time, right? By nature, and it needs to be allowed to do that. And sometimes, those views that we form as kids, right, as children, and like you said, even in young adult or even older years, sometimes those serve us and bring us closer, but other times they also disrupt and prevent evolution in that relationship. It introduces kind of a rigidness that it becomes very difficult to escape, and oftentimes will actually kind of self-perpetuate, right? That animosity that we're going to talk about, that distance between us and God.
Yeah, that was very true for me. You talk about this rigidness, this inflexibility. I know what I know about God, and nobody's going to change my mind.
Yes.
And I had that for a long time. And the problem is where that becomes destructive for recovery. As I think back on my heavy addiction years, I can tell you the absolute predictable automatic scenario.
Yeah.
Right. So life becomes unmanageable for whatever reason, stress, feelings of unworthiness, lose a job, fight with the wife, kid out of control, whatever it is, whatever thing would make my life unmanageable. And then I would run to my place of self soothing and self medication and escape that I learned as a kid growing up. Right. In my
Yeah.
case, sexual outlets, pornography, masturbation. And when I would do that afterward, you realize that it didn't fill all the holes or gaps or be the magical solution you hoped it would be.
What?
Yeah, I know, right? Shock. It felt good for a minute or an hour, but then reality hits afterwards. And then I would find myself trying to go to the real source, trying to turn to God.
Yeah.
But here comes the great paradox of all of that, the conflict, the contrast. Wait, I've just engaged in these behaviors that are directly contrary to everything God holds dear and precious to him. I've just done that. How
Yeah.
in the world am I going to now turn to him
Mm.
in my true need to get help? And all I would see in that moment after I had acted out was this disappointed face, right? God with this look on his
Yes.
face like, "Oh, you did it again, didn't you?" And his arms are folded and he's kind of tapping his foot on the ground. And what I saw was really the parent figures in my life, my mom, my stepdads. It was the same disappointed look they would have when I screwed up. And that
Yeah.
was kind of the only way I had as a kid to interpret God, was by kind of comparing him to those that were godlike in my life, which is almost always the adults in our lives. So I just saw this disappointed look on his face, and I'm supposed to have that image in my head and then get raw and real and transparent and close to that guy.
Yeah.
That just didn't work for me.
No, absolutely. Right.
So I would just default to formalities, the formal prayer with all the right these and thous, and it was very
Mhm.
mechanical and robotic, and I just sort of did it because you're supposed to. And
Yeah.
get off my knees and walk away without what I really needed. I wasn't filled. I wasn't close. I didn't feel like I had somebody in my corner. So it's just that was just a perpetual downward spiral for me. Act
Yeah.
out, need God, feel farther away from him, try to approach him, not be able to because he's disappointed and disgusted with me. Go act out again, get farther
Hmm.
from God, need him even more, right? Down into the pit we go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the spiritual spin on the addiction cycle, right? It's just that ever deepening chasm, right? That enmity, if you will, between us and our God, our higher power.
Yeah.
I mean, my experience was very similar to yours. It's like we were talking about before, my mom and I, we're very close now, but growing up, especially after my dad's death, we we had a pretty emotionally distant relationship for various reasons. And that definitely fed into what we're talking about right now, was this idea that, my the what I interpreted from my childhood, in interactions with my parents and others as well, or my mom specifically, was, kind of, it's this suck it up princess, handle your crap, right? Figure it out on your own, figure out what you need to do or change, and then do it and work hard, right? And in many cases, that served me, but in the spiritual sense, all it did was hold me back, because what did that lead to? Just like you're talking about the spiritual cycle, it led to that I've just got to try harder. Just got to try harder, right? I got to fix this. It's not God's problem to fix this for me. I got to fix it. So I'm going to go to him once I'm better and say,
Yes.
"Ta-da, look, God, I just want you to know, like, I'm fixed," right? Just,
Yes.
I've been sober for 3 weeks or a month. I mean, those arbitrary timelines. I've been
Yes.
sober for a month, and, just wanted to clue you in and let you know. Get my
Yes.
pat on the back from you and move forward.
Yep.
I think I've used the example on here on the podcast of, what that understanding of God perpetuated for me was, we talk about this in the book, is like going to the doctor a month after you get over your illness and
Yeah.
being like, "Hey, I just wanna let you know the last month has been hell, but I'm good now."
Now I can ask for your help.
Absolutely. Now we can just sit and chit chat about how good things are.
I know.
So
It's so true. It's so true. I often will ask my guys, I kind of, I, I guess I'm sort of apologizing for doing this with my guys all these years because I sort of take advantage of their religious rigidity, but I'm not really apologizing. But I'll often ask this question. So let's assume that you've just acted out. You've looked at porn or gone to sexual outlets. You've reached climax. Blah 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 blah, and it's over. How long do you have to wait until you can approach God and get close to him and get help and express yourself? How long does it have to be? And
mm,
I'll ask them to think about their church handbooks or doctrines or treaties or bylaws or whatever it is. And I've gotten some really interesting answers over the years. Well, it's 90 days
yeah,
or 3 weeks or 72 hours,
yeah.
right? And it's this random stuff about what you have to do and how much time has to pass and all the hoops you have to jump through
Yeah.
before you can turn to God because you screwed up.
It's like God's sitting there holding an egg timer, and you just keep resetting it every time you act out, right?
I know, right? He said, "No, nope, not yet. The timer hasn't gone ding, so you can't approach me."
You haven't suffered enough. You need more pain.
I know, it's just so crazy.
I mean, it's funny to chuckle about now, but I remember what we're talking about. I mean, that was really the thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, we could kind of dialogue on that all day, because there are lots of ways in which that happened. But yeah, I mean, you have to be asking yourself, going back to that question I threw out there before, if you're going to open your mind up to, a new concept, you really do have to ask yourself, look at the evidence, right? How is that relationship currently working for you? It's not a sarcastic question, it's sincere. As I look back over my 20 years, 30 years, 50 years of life experience, not just around addiction, but in other areas of my life, how is this notion of God serving me and helping me draw closer to that higher power to enhance that relationship? And which parts of it are distancing for me?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think, to overcome that rigidness or that fear of exploring this, just like other areas of the addiction, you have to get to a point where you've experienced enough pain where you're able to say more or less, you know what, well, screw it, I may as well just try, because what I'm doing right now hasn't really landed me where I want to go. So why not give it a shot, right? I mean, the worst case is I just end up where I am anyway. And
Well, and just
so,
to talk about how rigid I was, as you just bring this up, I'll tell you what I thought years ago. Oh, that sounds great, Steve. So you're telling me to be open to a different concept of God or a different relationship. Well, God is God.
yeah.
You're telling me I can change him? You're telling me
Mm,
I can alter him somehow?
yeah.
He is who he is.
Sure.
I
Sure.
was I was so stuck. It's like I can't change my relationship with him. He's him.
Yeah. My growing up, my parents' shower wasn't a curtain shower. It was one of those showers, where it blurs everything,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. Kind of opaque.
Yeah, exactly, opaque. And so you could tell if somebody was in there, obviously, but it was sort of like a censored version of whoever was in there, like on
Right,
TV.
right, right.
The way what you're talking about is so true, because I am also a big believer God doesn't change. And when we're having this conversation, you bring up a great point. We're not talking about changing God or swapping God out. What we're doing is talking about revisiting old ideas, old concepts that may or may not be accurate, that you've always kind of considered to be accurate the whole time, right? And so, going to my shower analogy, the reality is it's like I was sitting here trying to understand God and looking through like four of those shower windows. It's
Yeah.
like I could kind of see him there, right? Generally speaking, I could tell if he was doing whatever, but there was so much detail and so much that was filtered out or distorted, that beyond that basic understanding of some of the more base characteristics of God, reality is I was way off base, right, in what I'd assumed, because I'd been looking through those four shower windows for years, peeping tom on God, trying to figure out who he is, and just
Yeah.
never got to that place of figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we talk, we're gonna delve more deeply into some of these things next week when we talk with the women about betrayal, trauma, and God. And then we're going to do a third installment about this where we talk to both the men and the women and get into some really practical things about the spiritual aspects of your healing and your recovery. But let's delve right now into the assignment for everyone
Okay.
listening. What do you do with this?
Okay.
Okay, you're saying I should be more, maybe explore openness about who God is and my relationship with him, maybe be willing to at least question some of what I've assumed over
Mm-hmm.
my life. So, how do I come at that? Because
Yeah.
this is deeply entrenched, hardwired stuff. Hey everybody, Mark and Steve here. Are you looking to take your recovery and your marriage to the next level?
We work with individuals and couples one-on-one.
With both in-person and online therapy options, you have access to the experts anytime, anywhere.
To learn more, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, what we're talking about and why these ideas are so concrete, right, is because it's probably one of our earliest belief system for many of us, right? Before we could even really understand relationships with other people, that at a very basic level, we were forming this relationship. And so, I think there's a couple of things to that. The first is you have to. I don't know how much this applies to other people, but you have to, I guess, in a healthy way, maybe get a little bit irreverent, just in terms of letting go of that idea that I can question things. I personally, this is just gospel according to Steve, I personally believe that God is a big boy and can take it. He can tolerate me asking questions, and that questions are actually a good thing, if I'm doing it from a perspective of seeking understanding, not trying to disprove. And so I think that where you have to start is you have to be able to get real with yourself, and just say, okay, if I was to kind of describe God like a friend, right? If somebody asked me to just describe him, not doctrinally, right, but as I understand him, as I look through my four shower door filters, right? What are the beliefs that I've been holding on to God about, right? and start looking at those through the lens of, once you get an honest list going, be contemplating and thinking about which of these are working for me and taking me closer to what my idea is versus not. And so while you're making this list, the other thing you have to do is you have to come up with and dream up a list of, what characteristics. So it's kind of two assignments. So sorry, we're
Two
giving you
parts.
multiple here. Yeah, two parts. You have to come up with an idea of what you want your recovery to look like. We've talked about this concept before, right? Forming that vision for recovery of, what if 5 years from now, if I'm free from this, what else would I anticipate I'd be like, right? Not just sober, but would I be more confident? Would I be less shame based? Would I feel more empowered? Would I feel a higher energy and zest for life? I mean, whatever it is for you. And then you take that list and you look at it through the God list of how that relationship is now, and you just start asking yourself those honest questions: which of these are working and not, right? And then there's
Yeah.
then there's a second list, of course, that you're going to make, and we're going to have Mark talk about that.
No, I love what you just said. What's my ideal vision for recovery in life going forward? Where do I want to be 5 years from now, personally in my marriage, or if I'm not married, will I have a relate? What does that look like for me
Yeah.
to be happy and fulfilled and connected? And then looking at your relationship with God now and making a list of all of the characteristics and attributes and what you think he's like, and what's the relationship like for the two of you, and is that helping you get closer to your ideal where you want to be in 5 years, or is it moving you farther away, or just stagnating where
Hmm.
you just don't seem to go anywhere? So yeah, listing what that's like. And then the other side, the other list you want to make is, okay, what would be the characteristics and attributes of God to help me get as close as possible to my ideal? What kind of God would help me progress on the path of getting to that place of peace and happiness and freedom from addiction and closeness in relationships? What does that God look like?
Yeah.
What do I need from him? What would be the ideal things that he would bring to me in order to help me to progress on that path? What is that God like? And this is where a religious background can get difficult. Well, what are you saying, Mark? You're making God in your own image? We're told not to do that. And that's not what we're saying.
Yep.
What we're really saying is, it's kind of, you're going through this exercise and saying, God, here are my needs. Here are the things I need from you in
Hmm.
in what I feel is most important for me to progress on this path. It's almost, you're making a list, but think of this list as almost like a prayer, a written prayer. Here's what I need from you. It's kind of a yearning from your heart,
Yeah.
writing down those attributes and characteristics that you desperately need. And is that okay to do? Is that okay to express that in writing?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, and there is an element of having to kind of let go and be a little bit free here with your thinking. I'm a big believer that again, any relationship it always requires evolution. The marriage that I have with my wife today is in small subtle ways different from the relationship I had with my wife last week. It's much more different from the relationship we had 2 years ago. It's vastly different from, 8 or 9 years ago pre-recovery. And what we're asking you to do and what we're introducing is this concept that allow this relationship to evolve. Open your mind up to, a potential for new possibilities or new ways of thinking. Because as my sponsor told me once upon a time, you can always have your old ways back. It's not like they're going anywhere, right? You can always go back to it. But there's a value, I think, in exploring that and seeing which parts might again, not that we're changing God at all, but which parts maybe have been less like actual truth and a little bit more looking through the shower door kind of a concept.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
which aspects of God have you perhaps hyper focused on, maybe even exaggerated or amplified, and what other attributes or characteristics have you been blind to, or diminished, or not been willing to receive because of your own feelings of shame? there are many, for me, there are many parts of him that I just wouldn't accept because I
Yeah.
wasn't worthy to accept them.
Oh boy.
He
There's that.
can't be that for me because I'm not because he can't be that, but I'm not worthy to receive that part of him.
Oh man,
That's only for
worthiness.
the good people.
Yes. And that is a segue into a future podcast as well,
Right,
because
isn't it?
I've got a lot to say about that concept of worthiness.
I can only
So,
receive the harsh aspects of God because that's all I deserve.
yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And so there is kind of, you bring up a good point. Not to say you need to be making like 10 lists here, but something you want to be considering as well is what is your, I mean, what is your own nature, right? If you're going to, if, and what are your attributes? What things do you realistically bring to the table? Because we don't just see our relationship with God or with a higher power or other people through a distorted lens. We, of course, are seeing ourselves through a distorted lens, right?
Yes.
Part of entertaining this concept of God might be willing to, interlude in my life more than I think that he has, is going to mean entertaining this concept, like you indicated, that maybe worthiness isn't a requirement. Right? Maybe that there's more, maybe there's more to you, to your potential, to your worth, to your higher power, to your God, than you feel right now.
Yeah.
I have yet to run across a single addict in my entire 10-year history of doing this, including myself, who has ever been able to give me, even at the beginning of recovery, even a remotely close idea of who they really are and their value and their potential.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. No, in fact, a group I had a while back, I asked a question. I said, how many of you believe that just as you are right now in this moment, that God can use that person to do good things, just as
Hmm.
you are right now, no different, no less, no more. He can use you just as you right now.
Yeah.
And there was a big pause and they didn't know how to answer it. Well, what do you mean? I shouldn't get better? I shouldn't try to. No, that's not what I asked you. Can God use you as you are right in this moment to go
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah. Well, and kind of an extension of that, and again, we're introducing various topics we'll
I
probably cover
know.
another day, but can God accept you as you are,
Yes.
right, today?
Can God accept?
Um,
Does He accept you
is
just
there
as you
some
are?
sort of arbitrary bar that you've got to reach? Because
Yeah.
again, as you indicated at the beginning of this podcast, the more we try to reach that bar through the lens that we see now for most of us, the further away that bar becomes.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, it's like way off in the distance, a mile down the road, and we're never going to get there the way that we are. And so,
Yeah.
again, you can always have back the old thinking, but explore a little bit this week, and your own thinking. This is a great thing. We would encourage you to do this for a couple of minutes every day. This isn't the kind of assignment you sit down and do once.
Yep.
Because there is again, it's going to take a little while for some of you to even just get in the mind frame of being able to think this way. But definitely do make concrete lists, and we're going to take those and work on those on part 3 of this. Like Mark indicated, next week we'll talk to our spouses of addicts and talk about how the same concept often interacts with them, and some advice going forward that way.
All right, everybody. We will see it. Well, you'll, hear us, see us, whatever, us next week.
Yeah, that's right. Have a good week, everyone. We'll
See
see
ya.
you.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Together, we can do the impossible.
To learn more about Mark and Steve and to listen to more podcast episodes, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.